We good to go, Jeff?
Second. All right, we are live.
Just want to welcome everybody to our first town hall meeting. This is our hope to be first of many and routinely to be the first Tuesday of the month. With this being the first one, we have taken a list of questions from different interest groups that seem to be uniformed questions across the board and allow our command staff to address these topics of interest. First, I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Ben Edwards. I am a sergeant in the Support Services Division. I'll be the facilitator for this event. I'm going to start by introducing the panelists who are our command staff that are composed of an interim chief and 3 lieutenants. The lieutenants serve as division commanders for their assignments, and I'll let them explain those in general. We have interim Chief Cole on the line. We have Lieutenant Flood, Lieutenant Velez, and Lieutenant Sisk on the line. Let's start with you, Chief Cole. A little bit about who you are and what your position is. You're going to need to unmute.
My name is Crystal. I was born and raised in Alamance County. I've been with the Graham Police Department going on 24 years. I currently serve as the interim police chief, and previously I was serving as the agent assistant chief of police. A little bit about me, I'm animal friendly. I have a daughter that's a freshman in college, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight to take questions from our community members and bridge our gaps in communication with our community. Lieutenant Flood, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Lieutenant Flood. I am currently serving as the watch commander over the Support Services Division here at the Police Department, which the Support Service Divisions consist of our records personnel, parking enforcement, training division, things outside of your patrol and investigative stuff. It's basically what's handled out of this division here. As far as me, myself, I've been with the Graham Police Department now for 22 years. I was born and raised here in Graham, have lived here in Graham practically all my life. Always been here in Alamance County throughout my entire life. A little bit outside of Graham, but most of my life here actually living as a resident in Graham, and currently here I'm as a resident in Graham. As far as me, I enjoy doing a lot of different things, wear many different hats. As far as things I do a lot of coaching in the community between the Graham Middle School and helping out with Graham High School with their athletics programs, and then have for many years been a coach through Graham Park and Rec. So I do a lot of time of involvement with our youth. So I'll hand it over to Lieutenant Sisk.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Daniel Sisk. I'm the commander over the Criminal Investigations Division and the accreditation function and the evidence function of our agency. The Criminal Investigation Division is responsible for handling any more intricate investigation that requires a little bit more time than is what is available for our patrol officers. Evidence function, any piece of evidence collected by any person that's conducting their investigation comes through our evidence tech, who then processes it and puts it in our evidence storage. And our accreditation function is what keeps our agency in line with the CALEA standards. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in Wake County, graduated from East Carolina University with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Started my police career here in Alamance County. Began here in 2005 with the Graham Police Department, have a total of about 18 years law enforcement. And Lieutenant Velez.
Good evening. Lieutenant Tony Velez with the Graham Police Department. I'm the Patrol Operations Division Commander here. Pretty simple about what we do is all the guys who answer all the 911 calls and call takers and patrolling the neighborhoods and businesses. They all work in my division. I'm a lifelong resident of Alamance County. I grew up in Mebane. I graduated from Eastern High School in '97. I served in the Army at Fort Bragg. And I started in 2001 and spent the majority of my career as a patrol sergeant and a field training officer. So I've been here 19 years.
Great. Thank y'all for giving a little background. Just want to explain to all the participants that we have compiled a list of questions through multiple groups, and it seems to be the same questions. So we want to inform in a broader spectrum to make sure everybody's getting the information. Our vision for these community town hall events is that you can reach out live and organically during the webinar by entering your question into the question and answer section in Zoom. You can also feel free to email your question to policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. Again, that's policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. Additionally, when you do submit your questions through the Q&A section in Zoom, we ask that you have a way to correspond. We can correspond back to you. So if this lasts longer than an hour, we want to make sure that you get the answer to your question and it's not left out. So if you can provide a cell phone number or an email address, we'll be happy to contact you back. We're not going to make that all of our questions be the forefront, so we're going to try to take those live through those two options. Please be patient as they come in so I can read those and forward those out to the appropriate staff member. So without further ado, I'm going to start with one of the emails that we received from a citizen. This could be a lengthy one, so bear with me. To whom it may concern, the question is for Chief Cole. Being that there is a low number of females in law enforcement compared to males, in your opinion, what impact difference does it make for you to be advancing through your department? I'm going to stop there and let you address that one, and I'll continue to read the questions because there are several in the email.
I feel like it creates a welcoming space for women in the policing profession when they see representation in command positions of women in policing. I feel like it gives our females a role model to look up to see the path to advancing in policing.
Okay. Goes on to say, being a graduate of the FBI Academy, what valuable skills did you gain to help you serve the community better as a chief?
So I think one of the values of attending the FBI National Academy exposure to policing professionals from around the world. You really had contact and lots of conversation about different policing philosophies. You were exposed to cultural differences. I would say one of the key takeaways from the FBI Academy, National Academy was it helped broaden my perspective and scope in law enforcement. The experience introduced new ideas to the ways and views that I had of policing. Our agency utilizes different management trainings, so we're not one-dimensional. We utilize, we've had Sergeant Edwards. He's been a recent graduate of Southern Police Institute in Louisville, Kentucky. We've had Lieutenant Sisk and Lieutenant Velez attended AOMP from NC State University, and they would be able to talk about that. Flood has attended West Point Stephen, and also Leda Trilogy. So we try to utilize different management programs to give us different perspectives on leadership and different training topics.
Okay. And the next question. In reaction to the death of George Floyd and recent arising of the need for police reform, what are your thoughts and reactions towards your own department, and what changes will you have to continue to make?
So some of the things that came to the forefront pretty quick were areas that we thought we were performing well. We thought we were performing well in the communication arena. And we quickly realized that we had undereducated our community about policing practices. We also realized that we were doing a poor job at communicating with our community members and receiving information, community expectations. Although we do a community survey every 3 years, I feel like we failed to meet the mark at listening to our community in the current climate. So some of the things that we are in progress with about engaging our community, I'm going to let Flood go in and talk about some of the engagement activities that our agency is currently undertaking. We've also recognized that some of our shortcomings were on our social media platform, and we have reached out to other departments within the city to assist us at working on improvement in areas that we feel like we're heavily deficient. There's going to be a creation of a Chiefs Advisory Committee where we will be able to receive input from our citizens directly on a monthly platform. Lieutenant Flood, will you please expand on some of the engagement activities that our agency is currently participating in and upcoming things that we will be hosting?
All right, so as far as our community engagement has been something that has always been important to us, and there's been things we're doing throughout the years. We're trying to ramp up and do even more than what we have done in the past. Some of the things we've got coming up is, of course, well, we just got finished with doing a mask campaign where we're giving away masks. We're currently working on this year, which will be something new for us, is for Thanksgiving. We're working to put together turkey dinners for at least 100 less fortunate or at need families here within our community that could use that meal for Thanksgiving, a season of giving, and do something to brighten up their holidays around Thanksgiving. Another thing that we got in the works right now that we're working on, that'll be another one of our big projects we've been doing for almost 20 years now, and it's called Operation Merry Christmas. And our Operation Merry Christmas is based around the foundation of identifying right here in Graham these families that are in need that cannot provide Christmas for themselves. We actually step in and get community donations and things and provide them with one of the best Christmases they could possibly have, fulfilling wishes of these kids that they may not get otherwise. It's been a very successful program over the years, and we're excited about this upcoming year and it being another successful year. We've got the trunk or treat we're getting ready to do for Halloween. Halloween's been a big thing we've done for several years now. We're getting ready to do that trunk or treat, and we're continuing to look at other ways that we can get out to community. We're working on scheduling some what's called a barbershop rap session and a salon social, which will give a chance for our officers to be out in the community and people come in and talk with them and ask them questions and get to know our officers. It's always very important for our community to know the officers that are out there serving them, to, put a name and a face together as someone that they can come to in a time of need. So that's very important to us and something we're working on right now.
Great. Just want to remind everybody who may just be still joining in, this is a community town hall where you can feel free to submit your questions live. You can do it 2 different ways through the Zoom Q&A. Just ask that you put in your responding email address for additional correspondence if we need to get back to you. And also, you feel free to email us at any time in the future or now to policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. Policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. We're going to be moving on to another question. It seems to be a common theme amongst many citizens who want to know. So we're going to roll this out to everyone directly. What programs have your officers taken on de-escalation tactics? Lieutenant Flood, would you like to address that one?
All right, so de-escalation tactics, I know that's something that's a big question. I have been a law enforcement instructor now for over 15 years and teaching new officers as well as officers inside the department with in-service training and things of that nature. And one of the things I do teach is de-escalation techniques. De-escalation has always been there in different formats over the years, whether it's called verbal judo or interacting with people in crisis, different forms and different types of de-escalation. It's just never been really called de-escalation until here in recent years. back when it started becoming a big topic and a push for de-escalation, the state actually mandated back 2 years ago as a part of our mandatory in-service training we have to do each year, a class specifically on de-escalation techniques and de-escalating someone that's in crisis. So we continue to do that each year since then and everything. When the mandated in-service training comes out, there's usually stuff that touches on de-escalation techniques. Here recently, when it comes to the training of our officers, when it comes to de-escalation and the way they deal with people, myself and the other two lieutenants, we just recently attended a class called Implicit Bias and Impartial Policing that touched on different topics when it comes to being police officers and recognizing biases that we may have within inside ourselves and biases that are common to individuals. We went through that training, which was very beneficial. Thought it was a great training. So after we completed that initial, I actually went back and attended an extended class to become a trainer, and given the credentials I need to actually go out there on part of the National Command and Staff College and actually teach implicit bias and impartial policing training. And that's something that we're going to be looking forward to doing even more within our department. We've always throughout the years touched on ethics, de-escalation training, and being impartial in the job that we do. But there's always room for improvement. There's always more that we can do, focusing on making sure that we all throughout our job keep a sound moral compass so that we can go out there and handle these situations we're faced with appropriately.
Thank you, Lieutenant Flood. The next question is for Lieutenant Velez. What does the Graham Police Department policy say about the use of chokeholds and strangleholds?
All right, well, like I said, I've been here 19 years and our policy has always prohibited chokeholds and strangleholds in our use of force policy. We have never allowed that. And because, that is not a trained tactic that is part of a basic law enforcement training here in the state of North Carolina. Other than this, always been prohibited, I'm not really sure what else we can do to elaborate upon that.
Okay. Expanding upon that a little bit more and a broader perspective, Lieutenant Velez, what is the use of force continuum and the parts therein? What is it, and how does our policy address it?
All right. The use of force continuum is a while. However, we in our policy no longer use a use of force continuum, as in it's been trained amongst officers that continuum has caused hesitation when historically amongst police officers when they're attempting to make a decision. So our use of force policy tells our officers in what situations what force is used and what is appropriate that comes to task between the custody. I know we've had this question before about use of continuum, and that was something that was used in the past, but we no longer use that because sometimes when you face a certain situation, you don't have time to go through all the steps. You can skip around. This is why we no longer use a continuum.
Okay, thank you. Up next is Lieutenant Sisk. What is the officer's responsibility to intervene in an unlawful arrest or use of force?
Graham Police Department policy states that an officer must intervene or shall intervene if they see an unlawful arrest or an unlawful use of force, if it can be done safely. It's my understanding of my entire law enforcement career is that if I witness an officer doing something illegal as far as use of force, that it was my responsibility to intervene to prevent it from happening.
Up next, the next question is for Lieutenant Flood. In regards to the use of force with a firearm, what does the policy say about shooting at moving vehicles?
All right, our policy prohibits the shooting at moving vehicles unless the only time it would ever be allowed for to shoot at a moving vehicle is if it's a position to where you have to defend yourself or another to where they can't get out of the way of that vehicle. So it's prohibited overall, for the most part, prohibited for shooting at a moving vehicle for the simple fact of if I shoot at a moving vehicle, all I'm doing is potentially putting another weapon out there to cause harm to others that would be out of control. So it's not allowed, something we do not do.
Thank you. the next question is for Chief Cole. There have been some questions broadly about who certifies law enforcement officers. Where does that serve? What is a certification? Where do we get that certification from? What goes into that? I will say there are two different commissions: the Criminal Justice Education and Training Standards and the Sheriff's Education and Training Standards Commission. Can you expand upon both of those, more specifically the Criminal Justice, as that's the one we report to, and what do they do?
So North Carolina Criminal Justice Training and Standards Commission is our credentialing body for the state of North Carolina. They verify that applicants have the required training with with the BLE that is mandated by administrative code that dictates how many training now a new cadet has to have to become certified as a law enforcement officer in the state of North Carolina. The commission, the Training and Standards Commission for Justice, these credentialing for police officers, credentialing for laterals. They also conduct investigations into any issues that would jeopardize the certification of a law enforcement officer. They have some investigators in Raleigh that do independent investigations or inquiries into complaints or terminations with officers in the state of North Carolina. They also verify all out-of-state transfer and make sure that all mandatory areas of training are crosswalk, meaning that everything matches the North Carolina Administrative Code, the state that they're coming from. And they also do all of the inquiries to make sure someone was not decertified in another state that is transferred in Carolina. I've seen some information come out recently about a decertification database that states are starting to formulate. I'm sure that North Carolina will hop on with that and be able to have access to those out-of-state databases. Currently, North Carolina houses all decertifications in Raleigh. So if your credentials are reviewed by the commission, by the Training and Standards Commission, every city in North Carolina has to certify through that commission. And if your credentials have been taken at employment, let's say in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you came to Graham, we would have to go through that same credentialing body, and they would tell us if an officer's credentials had revoked, meaning they are no longer able to be a police officer in North Carolina. So that means they couldn't come to Graham either. I'm not sure how other states handle it. I can only speak about transferring in-state or if you come from out of state to in-state. The Sheriff's Training and Standards side of the house is the credentialing body for all persons that work at detention facilities, meaning at the jail, and also with a sheriff's office. If you work for Department of Corrections and you're a detention officer, that meaning like a prison guard or a correctional officer, I'm not sure what their terminology is. Sometimes they're a correctional officer and they're a prison guard. I don't know what their terminology is right now, but they're also credentialed under Training and Standards Commission. Campus police falls under the police umbrella, and they have their own set of investigators and persons that are to the commission, but they're also under the law enforcement umbrella with the state of North Carolina.
Thank you very much. Going along with that, you hear a lot of talk these days about having oversight, a body that oversees policies. The Graham Police Department happens to be accredited. This question is for both Lieutenant Sisk and Chief Cole. What is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, also commonly referred to as CALEA? Can you expand upon why it's important? What does it do for the city and the police department in general?
So I'm going to let Sisk answer that question. He and I just completed our accreditation training through APCO Institute recently. So I'm going to give Lieutenant Sisk the opportunity to share his knowledge that he's learned about CALEA.
So CALEA is a credentialing authority that makes sure that agencies are practicing what's commonly done throughout the country. It's comprised of a 21-member commission, and it's not as standard. It's got, I believe, 13 law enforcement executives along with members of the community, including town commissioners all across the country. It's not only just in the United States, but it also has international accreditation as well. So there's common practices that are done throughout the world with policing practices, such as use of force and stuff like that. The best way I could kind of compare it to apples, it would be like the American Dental Association or the American Medical Association. These are all associations that provide professional standards for that specific profession, and they make sure each, like for the Dental Association, make sure the dentists are doing the common practices that are done by dental professionals, and with the medical, making sure all the doctors are doing everything that they can do within the medical field. As part of that accreditation process, they do annual reviews of our practices by accessing all of our policies and all of our proofs. Proofs are just things that we use to show that we're actually about, not only do we have the policies in writing, but we're showing proofs such as incident reports or documents that we have completed to show that we are actually in compliance with those standards that are set forth by the commission. They do those annually, and then we get reaccredited every 4 years to get our full accreditation cycle.
So during this assessment time, we have outside auditors that come in. They come on site, they conduct interviews, they do ride-alongs with the officers, they look at documentation, they review policy while they're here, they talk to different people in our community, our business community, they look at and speak with folks in our local government. They communicate with our district attorney's office, with other law enforcement agencies in Alamance County. So there's also an actual on-site audit where these auditors come in from mostly out-of-state auditors will come in and review agency. And then they'll make a recommendation to this commission for reaccreditation. If an agency's not meeting standards or becomes out of compliance with mandatory standards, agencies can receive a probationary status, lose their accredited status together. Our agency has never been in the position where it's lost its status or been on a stationary agency, and we've been accredited since 1998.
Thank you all very much. Just want to remind the viewers that you can submit your questions live via the question and answer Zoom section. Please supply us with a way to contact you back in the event there needs to be some follow-up information. Additionally, you can email them directly to policeinfo@cityogram.com. Again, policeinfo@cityogram.com. I know I'm jumping around on the topics a little bit to give our panelists a break so we're not just focusing on one person for a 15-minute segment. So changing the topic a little bit, this next one is for Lieutenant Flood and Lieutenant Velez. What does the Graham Police Policy say about warning shots? Also, I would ask or explain what are warning shots and what liability do they pose?
All right, so I'll start with that. Our policy prohibits the use of warning shots. And there's a couple of reasons behind why we do not do warning shots and why we prohibit warning shots. First and foremost is that anytime an officer fires a round, we have to be accountable for that round. Where did that round go? Where did it ultimately end up? And firing the warning shots, the biggest thing to it is a safety issue. There's no safe way really of firing a warning shot if it's not a blank, in which we don't carry blanks. There's no safe way of doing it. If I fire a warning shot at the ground, if I'm not familiar with that ground, right up under the grass could be rock up under that grass that you don't see that a round could potentially ricochet off of and come up off the ground and strike someone that may not be involved in the situation at all. On the same token of shooting a warning shot into the air, so laws of physics there. What goes up must come down. So we fire that round into the air. At some point, it's going to come back down. And again, which poses a risk to anyone else, depending on how far that round travels as to where it's going to come down. What is it going to strike? Is that going to be it strikes an individual, it hits somebody's house, hits somebody's car? We don't know. So it's overall not a safe practice at all to fire warning shots. And that's really essentially why our policy prohibits it. And Lieutenant Velez, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Not really. I think you, just like he explained, when the officer they're using deadly force with their firearm, they're responsible for every round that leaves that weapon and its final resting place. So, I think that answers both your questions, which is why we don't do it and what the liability is that, if we're responsible for where it ends up, then you need to know where we're sending it. And if you're firing one, no idea where it's going to end up, that is a extremely high liability to accept, why we don't allow.
Muted now. Again, for those just joining, just thanking everybody for coming out for our first community town hall. We're kind of at our halfway point. We have two different platforms, Zoom, and you can watch via YouTube through the city's channel. You can submit your question by way of the question and answer section in Zoom, and you can email them directly at policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. Up next, we have Lieutenant Sisk. What does the department do to inform the public about unusual occurrences, crime, special events? What areas on this topic are we able to improve upon? This is to address the community relationship and the openness between law enforcement and the community to which we serve.
Additional information was shared through the media in the form of a press release. We still use those to get basic information out about crimes where there's nothing pressing, but we've had to evolve to where we're using social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, and to help with that, we have people throughout in the department and other people in the city that help us push information out through those platforms. Special events where we have the city planner or someone from the city or rec department that'll help us get information out about, like a pumpkin bash, which is a social event or whatnot. What we did find out is that it's very difficult in my position as the public information officer, that being just a offset of my day-to-day operation. So it's become to where we've recognized where we're in a media-driven society where information is constantly at hands of people, and we need to get that information out as quickly as possible if it's a pressing matter or if it's something that holds the public's interest. So what we've done to improve that is we have sped up those channels of communication to the people who can get that information out to social media and the like.
All right. I do apologize, some technical issues there, wearing multiple hats. The next question is for Lieutenant Flood. I know we touched on this earlier, but can you go into more in detail of what training officers at the Graham Police Department or in general receive about implicit bias?
That's another thing that's probably throughout the years touched on in service. Something we stress, especially when it comes to ethics, especially when they first coming in. things, but as law enforcement as a whole, and it's one thing I noticed when we went through that class, we could do more when it comes to officers on ethics training, when it comes to, helping them out with making, looking at their own moral compass, things of that nature, looking at biases that may build up within them that they might not even know. One of the statements that was made in that class we recently attended is you don't know what you don't know, meaning that you could build up a bias inside of you because it exists within all of us. But unless you have training and work through and learn about different mechanisms out there to help you recognize your biases, it can go unnoticed by yourself. When it comes to biases, it's something that exists in all of us. A good example would be, some people prefer a Chevrolet truck over a Ford truck. That's a bias when it comes down to it. So just helping us understand what biases can be, what kind of impact it can have on us, that can cause us to be viewed in a way to where we don't look like we're doing our job as impartially as possible. It's very important. And that's something that we're going to build upon. That's one reason why I went through that instructor course that I went through, is so we can do more of that training with our officers, because we want our officers to be beyond reproach and doing the absolute most professional job in which they can do.
So one of the questions that come in, I wanted to, on our question and answer platform, in cooperative agreements with other county law enforcement, whose rules or policies do you abide by? So, I'm sorry, I'm reading the screen as well. So when we have any type of, trying to look at this again. So if we're outside of our jurisdiction and we into another jurisdiction to help an agency and provide policing services, we feel bound by our agency rules and regulations. So for example, if I send Lieutenant Velez down to the beach to go help an agency, he's still bound by the rules and regulations of Graham Police. We're still in control of Lieutenant Velez, even though he's outside of the jurisdiction of Graham, he still has to follow the rules of the Graham Police Department. So the same thing applies to other agencies, whether it is a sheriff's office or the SBI or the FBI. If other agencies come to Graham to work in the city of Graham, they follow their agency's rules and regulations. That's how that works. We leave our service area, or if somebody comes into our service area. I hope I answered that question that came in.
Thank you very much. Again, reminding everybody that you can submit your questions live through the question and answer section in Zoom. You can also send your questions via email to policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. Again, policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. The next question is addressed to Lieutenant Flood. What does the Graham Police plan to do as far as any community events to bridge the gap between the community and law enforcement agencies or law enforcement officers? I know that we have talked about a few of those, but can you expand upon that as far as what we have done and what we plan to do in the future?
All right, so first off, tonight's community town hall meeting that we're having and the ones we got upcoming, the first Tuesday in November, first Tuesday in December, and potentially those even after that, is one of the things we're doing to help bridge that gap. I kind of touched on a little bit earlier with the barbershop rap session and the salon social that we're looking at putting together. Again, that's a good time for, of course, with COVID right now, we may have to start off a little bit on the Zoom platform with those, but actually getting out into places in the community where citizens can come and speak with officers, get to know their officers, and not just in a situation like this where you're just seeing command staff, where you see other officers in the department and get a chance to talk with them and get to know them and get to know the officers that are serving you ultimately. Outside of that, we're continuing to explore different ways. Officer we got currently right now working with our community engagement stuff is constantly exploring things and ways we can get out there into the community. Our citizen or our Chiefs Advisory Panel that we're getting ready to start up and getting put together. That's another one. That committee is going to be made out of members from the community. That's another way of bridging that gap where they can kind of have some involvement with the police department and get to know some of the inner workings of the police department, what's going on. We're also working with other agencies in the county to put together a unified Citizens Academy that's going to be made up of us, Mebane, River, things of that nature to bring together, which is another way of getting out to our community about law enforcement and bridging that gap. Chief Cole, I think you got something you wanted to say there.
I was going to say with the Unified Citizens Academy, anyone who's interested in participation, whatever police jurisdiction you live in. So if you live in the city of Mebane or city of Howell River or Elon, Gibsonville, all these agencies are participating, and you will see information go out through your local police department notifying you about this Police Academy. All the chiefs have come together in the county and fostered this idea, and it's coming to fruition. And so be on the lookout for information. We're going to do a combined effort the small policing agencies so that we can come together and have one Citizens Police Academy. So it'll be a great opportunity for citizens in Alamance County to learn about all the different municipalities that we house in this one county.
And just to follow up on what you're saying a little more, like I say, I talked about the barbershop rep social, the salon social. But we as an agency, we're always looking for different ways to get out there in the community. So I would encourage people that they've know of other ways that even outside the law enforcement realm that other places or other agencies may be doing that they're putting into effect to get it as a way to reach out to the community. Fire me an email, dflood@cityofgraham.com, or call the office and speak with me. I'm interested to hear those ways. We're interested in hearing from the community about ways that they feel can help us get more out there and involved with the community and help bridge some of that gap that's there now. Always looking to for new creative ways, and sometimes having that outside input can help out with our creativity and getting out there to the community.
Thank you very much. This next question is for Lieutenant Sisk and Lieutenant Velez. Just to remind everybody, these questions did not come from us. These are what we have found from different organizations that want to know more about law enforcement, more about police, more about our agency, and these seem to be a common question, so we have compiled those. We knew that this would be our first event, and then we would have a slow start as far as submitting your own questions. Just to remind everybody, you can submit your questions through the question and answer section in Zoom and by emailing to policeinfo@cityofgraham.com. For Lieutenant Sisk and Lieutenant Velez, what comprehensive reporting and analysis does the Graham Police Department do to track high-risk events such as police vehicle pursuits or use of force incidents?
I'll begin by talking about Velez. I'll begin by talking about the initial steps we take. Being such a high-risk incident, we have officers conduct reports or do reports for each of those events. So if any vehicle pursuit that officers involved in, any use of force they're involved in, they have to complete a separate report, separate from their incident report that they complete. That report is then, that investigation is then looked at by their supervisor, immediate supervisor, to determine if any policy violations occurred or if there's a shortcoming in our training or shortcoming in our policy. Once it makes it beyond that supervisor level, it goes to their respective commander. Whether if it came from the criminal investigations division, I would be the commander that would review that use of force. For patrol division, it would be Velez, and for the support division, if it was an SRO, that it would go to Lieutenant Flood. And then with that, we investigate in each incident individually. We do a comprehensive annual analysis of which Lieutenant Velez does that, and I'll pass that along to him to explain what he looks for and what he does during the annual review.
Yeah, Lieutenant Sis did well explaining all that, and he's exactly right. We do a separate report every time an officer uses force, and every officer involved in the use of force, regardless of, with being on separate incidents or together on one incident, has to complete that report, and then the next immediate supervisor of the officers involved has to do the investigation. And then annually, we do a analysis that measures the amount of use of force incidents we had compared to our calls of service. And also it records whether or not suspects or officers were injured, as well as ethics of all those involved. And we use that to determine, how our policies are being utilized, or do we have a training issue? If officers are having trouble abiding by the policy, do we have a policy failure, or do we have something that needs to be reinforced amongst our staff to make sure they're following policy? And pursuits work pretty much the exact same way. It measures the number of pursuits we have, which is relatively rare in the city. But in pursuits, whether or not officers or past third parties were doing pursuits, the amount of pursuits and crashes, the suspects were apprehended at the termination of the pursuit, how was the pursuit terminated, thing and any other agencies involved in the pursuit, as well as techniques used to accomplish the termination of the pursuit.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Chief Cole. Can you speak about what is the hiring practice or procedure for officers? What do they go through step by step, and what else is involved? Not just necessarily on a departmental level, but what is the next steps past that?
So when we open the process to hire these employees, and this is just isolated to sworn employees, certain hiring process are isolated to sworn employees only, but some of this fits for our non-sworn staff as well, depending on what section you would work in. For example, if you were an evidence technician, you may be subject to certain elements in the hiring process that sworn personnel would also be subject to. So be mindful that for hiring of police personnel, meaning sworn police officers, we also have North Carolina Administrative Code that we have to comply with. And it's not just simple like, oh, we want to hire this person because we think they'll make a good police officer. They have to meet all the elements in the administrative code, and the agency has to go through all of the steps. So the steps for hiring police officers is they make application through our HR department. The application will come over to the police side. There will be a mandatory background investigation done by a trained background investigator. And currently, all of our applicants that come in go through investigations. So a investigator does a background investigation. The applicant has to fill out a F3, which is a form from the state of North Carolina, and it gives all the personal details and data from the applicant. It goes into their education history, if they've had any kind of criminal charges or anything to do with their life prior to law enforcement or while they've been in the profession. It's on that form. So then the applicant undergoes a series of interviews by investigators, panel interviews, there's drug screens, there's polygraph exams. We outsource our psychological section to FMRT, and they do our fitness, medical, and any of our thing for our applicants, and everyone that's on staff at FMRT are all certified doctors and psychologists with our credentialing through North Carolina and are credentialed in some other states, but I'm not sure what other states. And so then the applicant goes all of the hiring process, and then they come our hiring board, and then a decision is made. So this rigorous takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months for an applicant to move through the hopper on hiring. And I can provide more detail on that with the administrative code. If someone would like to see that in writing, I can direct them to the sections in administrative code that are law that we must do in North Carolina to onboard a police officer. Just for more clarity if they need it.
Thank you very much. This can be a two-part question for two different people, Chief Cole, Lieutenant Flood. What has the Graham Police Department done for recruitment of the sworn and the non-sworn staff? What challenges do this agency and law enforcement agencies in general see in recruitment?
All right, I guess I'll start with that. So as our recruitment as far as for sworn and non-sworn personnel, we do reach out to through different platforms, getting information out there when we are hiring, as far as whether it be for sworn or whether it be for non-sworn personnel, through our different community colleges and colleges surrounding here. We also use a online platform where it's posted out there where they can actually apply online for any positions that we have opening with here in the agency. And since we've been doing that, especially the online portal, which is where technology is now, we're seeing more applications actually come in for these positions. However, what we're seeing is we get a lot of applications, but not necessarily applications to fit individuals that meet the requirements or are a good fit to be, especially in the sworn positions and our sworn personnel. One rule I've always stuck by and adhere to is, some people are meant to be the police, some people are meant to call the police. And we see a lot of people applying that where when you start running their background, when you start looking into them to find out if they're truly a fit to be a police officer, if, their ethical background and, their any criminal history they may have in their past, does it fit what we need to be a police officer? And that's a lot of times what we're finding they're not meeting that. And as an agency, as a police department, I don't think in any shape, form, or fashion do we need to lower our standards in order to fill positions. I think our standards need to be where our standards are at as far as what we're looking for in an officer, and we need to keep pushing to find those type of officers. It's going to be the best possible officers for our agency and for our community.
Thank you very much. We have a new live question that just came through on the Zoom portal. We'll read it verbatim. The Sheriff's Department has a bad reputation of a lack of inclusion and respect for all members of the community. You both are located in Graham. How do you create a different reputation than theirs? To what extent do you and other towns try to hold them and each other accountable? Thank you for hosting this town hall and openness. Oh, you want to address that one?
So I'm reading the question again. You were kind of going in and out. So we do share the same location for police department and sheriff's department for our neighbor, the sheriff's office. We're on the street. We do not interchange officers, meaning our officers belong to the City of Graham Police and the Sheriff's Department's officials belong to the. How do you create a different reputation than the Sheriff's Office? So our police officers are trained when they come in. They go through our extensive field training program. Our officers are trained to be in line with the visions and the missions of not only our police department, but our City of Graham visions and missions of the city. So traditionally, towns, cities they tend to have a different feel than county police departments. So we police inside the city, which is normally more neighborhoods. We are generally more community oriented. So we're interconnected with other, we boundaries are with other local cities. So you tend to have a different feel with policing professionals. Our backup is right here locally. We're not isolated out by ourselves. We have standards and ethics that we put in place that we expect our officers to abide. I can't speak to the policies of other departments. I know what our internal standards are, and that's what we hold our employees accountable to. So I hope that answers some of the questions on why there's a different feel. Each agency sets their own performance standards. Each agency sets expectations of their code of conduct, their action with their community. So that's what I can contribute to some of that different feel. I don't know if any of the other lieutenants want to chime in and maybe give your perspective on why you think there's a different feel to policing environments.
I think, Chief, I think you summed it up pretty good in your reply back to it. It's just biggest thing is, you know, when the differences in what we deal with, you know, as far as being in the city and being in the county, it's different exposures and different things you deal with can kind of change an appearance of an agency at time. But overall, I think you answered that well.
I think that for us, and I can't speak for any other departments, I know that we take our job serious for policing our police. That's the job of your command staff and your commanders. So our complaint process and internal affairs, we take that serious. The priority for our agency, making sure that we're responding to inquiries about officer actions and following through with our investigations. And so those things here help us to foster transparency with our community and our citizens. I think for our local police department, the fear of opening the doors to the agency and welcoming the public, we don't have a fear of that. I can't speak for other departments in this and to how they do business. I can only speak to Graham Police and how we handle our business here.
Thank you very much. You started in on another one of the questions. We can about run out of time. We can finish up with this one. Lieutenant Sisk, what is the complaint procedure for the Graham Police Department? And once they're received, how are they handled and investigated?
Complaints can be received in a couple different ways. You can phone it in. Generally, they will forward it to the supervisor on duty, but most likely it's going to go to one of the lieutenants. Once we speak to the person, we file an internal complaint form. If a citizen wants to come into the police department, they can fill one out themselves. We also have an online platform to the City of Graham's website, which a person can file a complaint there. And we've received some is just sending an email to bring a subject to our attention that we reach out. Once we get that information, we identify the officer involved. We determine at what level, depending on the severity of the possible violation, we determine who's going to investigate it. That's traditionally has been made by the assistant chief who was over the IA function at the police department. They would decide who is going to be investigated by and then assign that investigation to them. That investigation would include interviews with the complainant, interviews with possible witnesses, interviews with the officers. The person that filed the complaint would be notified once that incident is assigned to someone for investigation, and they're given periodic follow-ups on the outcome of the investigation. Personnel law prohibits us from being able to release a lot of information as it relates to that. Generally, unless the officer is fired, demoted, or had some kind of change in classification, we're not allowed to release that information to them. So they would, if they got a verbal warning, got a write-up, got a notification in their performance tracking system, then they would not be notified of that. They'd just be notified that it was completed. Once the investigation is completed, it's submitted back up through the chain and goes back up to the person who oversees internal investigations. They read everything over to make sure all the documents are completed fully, and to determine if they can supersede the punishment or determination based off the evidence they see in the investigation, and can make a ruling different from what the original investigator made. And then it goes to the chief of police, who signs off on it.
Thank y'all very much. It's been a pretty in-depth hour. I know we're at our time limit. I just want to let everybody know that we will be hosting more community town hall events. We picked the first Tuesday of the month. Our next one will be on November 3rd. We want to have an open relationship, to have your questions asked from the comfort of your living room. Feel free to, at any point in time, email us at policeinfo@cityofgraham.com, and we can correspond with you directly, or we can hold that question to our next town hall event. I'm going to give each participant and panelist an opportunity to have a closing statement. If you want to go ahead, go backwards this time. We can start with Liz.
We'll start with me because you cut out and I didn't hear what you said.
I do apologize. Just closing remarks. Do you have anything to say?
No, I appreciate the community giving us the opportunity to speak with them, and we look forward to doing so many times in the future. Everyone have a good evening.
Great. Lieutenant Sisk.
I think this is awesome. In my entire career, this is the first time I've actually had a platform to have community engagement, and I welcome more community involvement to let us know what we're doing right, but to also remind us of what we're doing wrong so we can fix it, because we are part of the community, and we do wish more community involvement to help us out.
Lieutenant Flood.
All right, just wanted to say thank you for everybody that did attend tonight. It was great to be able to come on here and do more to open our communications to our community and be more transparent to everyone. I see a message was posted on here about our next one being on November the 3rd, which is Election Day. I think that's something we'll discuss as a command staff, because it could be tricky for some. That's what's in the comments. So something we maybe can discuss as a command staff and maybe look at it. We want to keep it on that date or do something different because it would be an election day. But again, I hope tonight give you an opportunity, those that attended, to be able to see who your command staff is. We're here for you. You're the community we serve, and hope you can reach out to us if you have any ideas or any questions for us, and we can continue to be transparent and have this communication with you. Thank you.
And Chief Cole, if you want to, we also had before she closes this out, came in through the question and answer. People are recognizing that November 3rd is a tricky date due to the fact that it is election day. And when we picked the first Tuesday of the month, that's just how it landed. We can investigate, see what we can do for recording purposes and post this so any can view it at a later date. Chief Cole, close us out, please.
And so we will look at moving that date if we need to, if November is not a suitable date for us to receive maximum input from our community. So in closing, I would like to say, please look and pay attention to our social media. We're going to be posting information about our Chiefs Advisory Committee. I'm looking forward to working and engaging our community on platform at different level. And like I think Lieutenant Sisk was commenting, we love to hear what we're doing good. We'd like to see and hear our expectations from our citizens, the people that we serve. We like to be engaged in activities and events that are going on in our community. So if you have something going on and you shoot us an email, we can attempt to attend if we have free time, if it's not pre-scheduled, something already going on our calendars. So we're looking forward to maximum communication with our citizens. As for for joining, and we look forward to seeing you next month.